appeared again to Abraham near the oak grove belonging to Mamre. One day Abraham was sitting at the entrance to his tent during the hottest part of the day. He looked up and noticed 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he ran to meet them and welcomed them, bowing low to the ground. "My lord," he said, "if it pleases you, stop here for a while. Rest in the shade of this tree while water is brought to wash your feet. And since you've honored your servant with this visit, let me prepare some food to refresh you before you continue on your journey." "All right," they said. "Do as you have said." So Abraham ran back to the tent and said to Sarah, "Hurry, get 3 large measures of your best flour, knead it into dough and bake some bread." Then Abraham ran out to the herd and chose a tender calf and gave it to his servant, who quickly prepared it. When the food was ready, Abraham took some yogurt and milk and the roasted meat, and he served it to the men. As they ate, Abraham waited on them in the shade of the trees. "Where is Sarah, your wife?" the visitors asked. "She's inside the tent," Abraham replied. Then one of them said, "I will return to you about this time next year, and your wife Sarah will have a son." Sarah was listening to this conversation from the tent. Abraham and Sarah were both very old by this time, and Sarah was long past the age of having children. So she laughed silently to herself and said, "How could a worn-out woman like me enjoy such pleasure, especially when my master, my husband, is also so old?" Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh? Why did she say, 'Can an old woman like me have a baby?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return about this time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah was afraid, so she denied it, saying, "I didn't laugh." But the Lord said, "No, you did laugh." Then the men got up from their meal and looked out toward Sodom. As they left, Abraham went with them to send them on their way. "Should I hide my plan from Abraham?" the Lord asked. "For Abraham will certainly become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. I have singled him out, so that he will direct his sons and their families to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. Then I will do for Abraham all that I have promised." So the Lord told Abraham, "I have heard a great outcry from Sodom and Gomorrah because their sin is so flagrant. I am going down to see if their actions are as wicked as I have heard. If not, I want to know." The other men turned and headed toward Sodom, but the Lord remained with Abraham. Abraham approached him and said, "Will you sweep away both the righteous and the wicked? Suppose you find 50 righteous people living there in the city. Will you still sweep it away and not spare it for their sakes? Surely you wouldn't do such a thing, destroying the righteous along with the wicked. Why, you would be treating the righteous and the wicked exactly the same. Surely you wouldn't do that. Should not the judge of all the earth do what is right?" And the Lord replied, "If I find 50 righteous people in Sodom, I will spare the entire city for their sake." Then Abraham spoke again, "Since I have begun, let me speak further to my Lord, even though I am but dust and ashes. Suppose there are only 45 righteous people rather than 50. Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5? And the Lord said, "I will not destroy it if I find 45 righteous people there." Then Abraham pressed his request further. "Suppose there are only 40. And the Lord replied, "I will not destroy it for the sake of the 40. "Please don't be angry, my Lord," Abraham pleaded. "Let me speak. Suppose only 30 righteous people are found." And the Lord replied, "I will not destroy it if I find 30. Then Abraham said, "Since I have dared to speak to the Lord, let me continue. Suppose there are only 20. And the Lord replied, "Then I will not destroy it for the sake of the 20. Finally, Abraham said, "Lord, please don't be angry with me if I speak one more time. Suppose only 10 are found there." And the Lord replied, "Then I will not destroy it for the sake of the 10. When the Lord had finished his conversation with Abraham, He went on his way, and Abraham returned to his tent.
Ever feel like life's on hold, like you're stuck under the weight of some big promise that hasn't quite come through yet? Well, that's where we're headed in this deep dive. Genesis chapter 18, the story of Abraham and Sarah. Picture this. It's scorching hot. Abraham's chilling in his tent when, out of nowhere, three strangers show up.
And we can't overstate how huge hospitality was back then. I mean, this wasn't just about being polite, offering food, water, shelter. That was like a sacred duty, especially for travelers.
Totally. And Abraham, he goes all out, right? Shade, cool water for their feet. He even insists on making this whole feast, like the best flour, a tender calf, no holding back. It really paints a picture of going above and beyond, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It really shows his character. Yeah. But here's the thing. He has no clue who he's dealing with. The text kind of hints at it, though. These aren't just some guys who need a break from the heat. These are divine beings.
And that's where things get really interesting, because right there, in the middle of this meal, this huge promise drops. Sarah, who's listening in, she hears that she's going to have a son. I don't know about you, but her reaction, man, it really got to me.
Yeah, it's one of those moments where the Bible gets incredibly human. You know, Sarah, she's probably in her 80s, maybe even 90s by now, and she laughs. And it's not just about the whole, how am I going to have a baby at my age thing?
Yeah.
It's deeper than that, right?
Yeah.
It's like this heavy weight of a promise delayed, this sheer audacity of hope popping up after years of silence.
It makes you think about those times in your own life when something amazing was promised, but that little voice of doubt creeps in, like, really? You think that's going to happen?
Exactly. And that's what's so great about this. It challenges this idea that faith is just blind acceptance. It's way more interesting than that. It's a mix of doubt, questioning, even a little bit of, are you serious? It's the raw human side of faith, even when it comes to the divine.
What blows me away is that instead of some kind of, I don't know, punishment or something, the visitors, they get it. They don't shut down her doubts. They actually engage with them, reassure her about the promise. It's like even our doubts have a place in the grand scheme of things, you know?
Absolutely. And this whole thing with Sarah's very understandable reaction, it sets the stage for another big challenge, another moment where human perspective clashes with the divine plan. Because this chapter is not just about personal promises, it's about the fate of entire cities and Abraham's totally unexpected role in it all.
So we just heard about Sarah and her very personal struggle with doubt and belief. And now the story takes us from this intimate scene in Abraham's tent to something much bigger, the fate of entire cities.
And not just any cities, right? These are Sodom and Gomorrah, places that even back then had a reputation, and not a good one.
Yeah, the text doesn't sugarcoat it at all when it comes to describing just how bad things had gotten. It's like this powerful illustration of a community that's gone way off track, and now, well, it seems like there might be consequences.
And that's where Abraham's role takes this fascinating turn. He's not just the recipient of this divine promise anymore. He becomes an advocate, someone who's willing to speak up for others. He actually challenges God, asks straight up if the righteous are going to be swept away with the wicked.
It's kind of a breathtaking moment when you think about it.
I mean, on the one hand, you could see it as questioning God's judgment, but it strikes me more as Abraham being so, I don't know, empowered by his relationship with the divine that he dares to plead for mercy, for a more nuanced approach.
Yeah, it's like he's saying, wait a second, isn't there another way? Is there really no room for compassion, even here?
And what gets me is that God doesn't shut him down, doesn't say, who are you to question me? Instead, they have this conversation, a real dialogue. It speaks volumes about the possibility of humans actually playing a part in how the divine plan unfolds.
And that leads to the bargaining, right? Abraham starts with 50 righteous people. If God can find just 50 good souls in Sodom, he asks for the whole city to be spared.
And that brings us to this huge ethical dilemma, right? On the one side, you have this idea of collective punishment, the idea that a whole community is responsible for what happens in it. But then you have this incredible value placed on even a small group of righteous individuals.
It's like Abraham's clinging to this belief that goodness, no matter how rare it might be, has this power to redeem. And he's totally relentless. He keeps bargaining. The number goes down and down and down, 45, 40, 30. It's like he's
Oh, for
testing
sure.
how far
This
mercy
whole
can
bargaining
go.
back and forth just underlines how deeply Abraham feels this compassion.
Yeah.
His absolute unwavering belief that every single life matters. He just refuses to give up, even when it seems completely hopeless.
It makes you wonder, where would we draw the line? If we were in Abraham's place, how far would we go? Would we be willing to plead for the lives of people in a place like Sodom and Gomorrah, a place
It's one
known
of
for
those questions that never
wickedness?
gets old, does it? It really makes us face our own beliefs about justice and mercy, right?
Yeah.
Like, are we willing to fight for the redemption of a community, even one that seems beyond saving?
It's a tough one, that's for sure, and I don't think there are any easy answers. But this story, it makes us at least ask the question. It makes us deal with that tension between what individuals do and how it affects the entire community, and then think about where we fit into all of that. I don't know about you, but this whole back and forth, it's almost hard to listen to. We're right there with Abraham as he tries to bargain for these cities, Sodom and Gomorrah, and you can really
Oh,
feel how much he
absolutely. If
cares.
you want a
Oh,
master class
absolutely.
in how to stand up for other people, this is it.
Wondering, is it going to work? Are they going to find 10 righteous people? Will mercy
Well, as
win
we get to
out
the
in
end of
the
this
end?
chapter, we find out that even after all that passionate pleading, even with the number down to just 10, they couldn't find that many righteous people.
It's heartbreaking, really. It feels like there's no
Yeah, the text
escaping
doesn't
what's
shy
about to
away from how
happen.
serious this is. There are consequences for Sodom and Gomorrah, and they are swift and severe.
It makes you stop and think about the choices we make, both as individuals and as a society. What are the
Right, and it's important
consequences
to
of
remember
those
that this isn't
choices?
some simple math problem, like God's keeping score. And if there's not enough good, then bam, punishment. It's way more complex than that.
It's
It's about the
definitely not that
possibility
simple.
of a whole community turning away from justice, from compassion, to the point where it can't survive.
It's a tough concept to grasp, but it does make you look at what's going on in the world today. All the problems, the divisions, it feels a little like we might be
It's
headed for our
easy to
own
feel
time of
small in the
reckoning.
face of all that, like our individual actions don't really matter.
And yet, you have Abraham, this one guy who dares to stand up to God and plead for mercy. And okay, maybe he couldn't save those cities, but his actions, they send a powerful message about speaking up, about fighting for what's right, even when it
100%. I think
seems
that's the message
impossible.
to last, don't you? It's a call to action, a reminder that we don't know the exact tipping point, how many good people it takes to change the course of events.
Exactly. We may never know if it's 10 or 100 or 1,000, or maybe just one more person who's brave enough to speak the
And maybe
truth
that's
with
not even the
courage and
point, you
compassion.
know? Maybe it's not about the actual numbers, but about whether we're willing to be like Abraham, believing in mercy, never giving up on other people, even when all hope seems lost.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into Genesis chapter 18, I've got to say, Abraham's example is really something. He reminds us that we all have a voice and that our words have power to shape the world around us. Every act of justice, every act of compassion, it tips the
It's a
scales
powerful
just a little
reminder
bit.
that even when we're surrounded by uncertainty, even when things seem their bleakest, there's always hope if we're brave enough to use our voices to reach out to others and to remember that our actions matter, no matter how small they might seem.